Well, today we're going to look at Acts chapter 27 when Paul is basically taking over the cruise, if you will, because the other people are just scared to death, have no hope, anything whatsoever as far as getting saved from this thing. But Paul rises up in these verses and begins to take over and tell them what God has told him, and then we see the shipwreck actually take place. So if you would, look in Acts 27. We'll start with verse 13 and reread some of this here. In Acts 27:13 says, "When a gentle south wind began to blow, they thought they had obtained what they wanted, so they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called a northeaster swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of the small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. When the men had hoisted it aboard, they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together, fearing that they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, 'Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night an angel of the God whose I am and whom I serve stood beside me and said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island." I'll stop right there for just a moment. Notice how Paul has such confidence now. Where did he get that confidence? Now, understand, they've been in a storm for a third day. It's going to be 14 days. How many of you have been in a 14-day hurricane? None of us, right? It usually blows right on past. Somehow or another, they're right in the middle of it, and it just keeps blowing. 14 straight days. I don't know about you, but I'd have lost it after day one, right? I'd been the goner by that time. But 14 straight days, they're going to battle this surf, these waves. They're going to battle this northeaster wind coming in like a hurricane wind, blowing them south. And it's going to scare them to death because they know the coast of North Africa is right there close by. And they can count the days as they drift along and know they're about to hit the sands of Syrtis there, those sandbars out there. And a lot of ships, as I was studying this, there's a lot of ships that have been lost in the sands of Syrtis on North Africa. Get too close to them, get blown right into them, just sinks the ship right there. So they know that could be coming. So the whole crew, everybody else, 276 of them on here now, just about everybody is scared to death that they're going to hit the rocks on the north shore of Africa or somewhere out there and be lost at sea, completely gone. And so that great fear is gripping their hearts. All but one guy, well, probably Luke and Aristarchus too, but three guys. There's fear gripping their hearts because they think, this is it, that's my last voyage, I'm a goner. This is all there is to it, I'll never see my family again. But notice what Paul does. He gets up, he has a steadfastness about him. It starts off in verse 13 with, they made the decision not to listen to Paul. They're going to go ahead and sail anyway, just 40 miles around the coast of Crete there to go to a better port to, board up for the winter, if you will, for these storms to go by. And so they think they're going to make that 40-mile trip in that boat, and Paul's like, y'all better stay right here in Fair Havens. It's going to not be a good idea this time of year to sail. What time of the year was it? October, November. That's when the storms start hitting that Mediterranean area. And so they didn't listen to him. They take off, but the picture of verse 13 is that most of the time the plans of man start out pretty smooth until it doesn't become smooth anymore. That's pretty profound, isn't it? But notice what it said. A gentle south wind began to blow, south blowing them into the land of Crete so they can just kind of sail along the coast there for 40 miles and then take harbor. But it changed quickly as soon as they came out of port, didn't it? As soon as they got away from land, got just a little ways, and they're not far from the island. You need to get this. They're only maybe 3 or 4 miles off the island, sailing out there in the waters. But what happens immediately? He said they went along, they sailed along the shore. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called a northeaster come along and just blew them away from the isle. Just that quick, just took them out to sea. And they realized they couldn't fight it, so they had to drift along. That little island called Cauda, what they did there at Cauda, whatever it's called, is that they had a dinghy behind that boat. You don't see it on that picture, but they would have a dinghy back there as a lifeboat, dragging it with a rope. At Cauda, they rolled that dinghy in and got it back in a dinghy is made out of wood. Got it back in the boat is what they did at the south side, on the lee side of Cauda, so they could block the wind a little bit. But they just kept drifting. They're at the mercy. Notice that thing has no motor on it. It's going to be blown around by the wind. It's at whatever happens is going to happen to them. They have no control. They got udders. They can, with the paddles up front, they can guide it this way or that way, but not in that kind of wind. They're just going to pull up and just drag along is what they're going to do. But Paul here is in this deceptive calm suddenly changes, and they gave way and just were driven along. And Paul says it's not only natural for them to be upset or to give up hope. And these sailors have been out there a while. These passengers have been out there a while. They know what happens when these kind of things come along. But notice how Paul steps up and takes command and courage. He said, first of all, to them, remember, he said, he proclaimed the failure of the worldly to hear the warning of the godly. Remember what the Julius and them did? They heard Paul say what he said, but they were like, I'm going to trust the sailors. I'm going to trust the captain. I'm going to trust the boat. And we're not going to trust what Paul's got to say, because we want to go to just 40 miles along the coast and harbor up in a much better town, for them to hang out in. So they did not listen to godly advice from Paul. He proclaimed in verse 22, he's proclaiming to them the Word of God, God's promise. Look what it says there in 22. I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed. I bet the ship owner was like, well, thanks a lot, Paul, right? My ship's going to get destroyed, but notice this. He's saying your lives are going to be fine, folks. Your lives are going to be fine. How did he know that? How did Paul get that encouragement? How did he get that calmness about him? It says it right there in 23. Last night, an angel of the God whose I am. You know why he said it that way? Because a lot of those on that ship would probably say, you talking about Zeus? You talking about Apollos? You talking about some other god that we have in the Greek world and the Roman world? Because they had hundreds of them, right? No, he's saying the God whose I am and whom I serve. In other words, what he's saying, Yahweh. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is what he's saying. It just didn't line it out that way. But it's interesting he says that here in the first century, because here in the 21st century, we have to be careful which God we're calling out, right? Because the world doesn't understand our God, right? They understand many gods, even here in America, so we have to be careful to say, in God's Word it says this. They may be thinking you're talking about the Quran. You know what I'm saying? You got to let them know which God you're talking about. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yahweh, the God of Israel, that God, when we quote what God has says, and make sure the world understands it. And that's what Paul is doing here with these people, because there's a lot of heathen on that boat. 273 of them obviously are. And so last night he said, the angel of God, whose I am, and who I belong to, and whom I serve, stood beside me. He didn't hear a voice. He didn't come up with it on his own. The angel actually stood beside him. He saw and spoke and heard the angel speak to him God's promise. And he said to him in verse 24, don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. He's already got that promise too, doesn't he? That he's going to make it to Rome. So this is not the end of Paul. But here comes the kicker right here. He says, you're going to make it before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all of these who sail with you. All 275 others will be saved with you. All of a sudden, Paul's got this responsibility on his shoulders now. It's not just him against the world, is it, right? It's not just him and God against everything. It's him and all 275 others, or he's responsible to get them the message of salvation to them, and they will all be saved. Now, pay careful attention to that, because along the way here, you're going to see somebody try to throw what we call a monkey wrench in the works, right? And you're going to see what Paul says to them about this. But he's saying, this is God's promise. All of you will be saved that sail with me. And he said in 25, so keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that will happen just as he told me. Now, there's Paul's faith working. Right? He's heard the word from God. He believes the word from God, and he steps out on faith of that word, And he says, but nevertheless, and I noticed 26 sounds like an interesting verse. Nevertheless, we're going to have to run aground somewhere. There's still going to be a wreck. How many of y'all, when you hear the word of God, you think, okay, now I don't have to go through a wreck? Well, sometimes you may have to go through the wreck too, because you're involved with the people, or you're with the people that have to go through this wreck to show who God is. So therefore, you're going to be in the middle of the wreck also. Paul didn't escape the wreck, did he? He just had his life saved, as all 276 of them did. He had a promise that his life's going to be saved, but Paul, you're going to have to swim for it, buddy, because you're going to go through this wreck. And he says to them in verse 26, says, nevertheless, even though God has said this is what's going to happen, we're still going to have a wreck. And I look at that and I think of verse 26 like this. If I decide I'm going to go out there and just start sinning and doing all kinds of things, guess what? I'm asking for a wreck, aren't I? Is that wreck going to come? Maybe. But according to the grace of God or what God's trying to teach me, I could have a wreck coming because I'm going to have consequences of that sin. I can't just go out there and do that and not expect any kind of consequences, like God just going to rubber stamp it and smile and say, oh, don't worry about it, right? You can't do that, Christian. That's not the way he's called us to live, to go out and try to get away with sin. He's called us to do what? Turn away from sin, hasn't he? He's called us not to even touch it, to step away from it and fight it with all we got and all the Holy Spirit that has within us, to stay away from it, not to dabble with it and play with it and say, okay, I know okay, have mercy on me, God, That's just being, I don't know what the word is for that. Anyway, that's not what he's called us to do. And Paul's telling these guys in this boat, he says, you know what, we disobeyed what I said earlier, so there's going to be a consequence to it. We're out here now, we're getting blown around, we're in the third day of this hurricane. We are seasick as a dog, right? And we can't eat, it seems like. We're throwing stuff overboard, trying to not bottom out the ship on the ground. Coming up and down on the waves. So they're emptying the ship out, trying to get it as light as possible. And Paul's telling them, say, look, this is the only way this is going to work, folks. We got to do it the way that God has said. He's proclaimed we're all going to live. In other words, he's preaching the message of salvation to them. There is salvation, but this is the way we're going to have to do it. And that's interesting because we can bring that to 2021. How many people in this world try to find a different way to get to heaven than through Jesus Christ? And we all know there's only one way, right? Through Jesus Christ. Believe in him, and you will be you will gain entrance into heaven at your death, if you will. You got to believe in him. You got to trust in him. We preach that every day. But how many folks in this world are not believing that and say, "Oh, I'm a good person. I'm gonna make it. God's got to let me in. I'm good." Right? I go to church all the time. I tithe my $5 a week. Right? Yeah. Right. God's got to let me in. I'm a good man. I'm a good woman. I got good children everywhere. Whatever. Anything but believing and trusting in Jesus Christ. And we're going to see that happen in this story in just a moment. And Paul's going to call their bluff on it. In other words, he's going to call them out on what they're doing. But notice in this whole thing, it's going to be God's way or no way. Paul proclaimed his faith in God's promise. In verse 25 and verse 26, he proclaimed the necessity of trials first. Those trials are going to come. How many in this room have ever been in a trial before, right? You can wave at me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody in here has now. You've had some kind of trial or tribulation in your Christian life, hadn't you? When you accepted Christ, it probably got rougher, didn't it? That's a good word, isn't it? Rougher. Yeah, it got worse than it was before you were a Christian, all the trials that came your way. Because what happens once you accept Christ? The enemy turns on you then, doesn't he? When he's got you, he'd care less. When he doesn't have you, that's when he wants to destroy you and take care of you in his own way. So trials and tribulations come our way. Things that come our way to test our faith and prove our faith. This is happening in this shipwreck. It's testing Paul's faith, and it's testing all these people to believe. Now let's look at verse 27 and work our way on through here. This is the actual wreck here. It says, on the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea. When about midnight, the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it to be 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors to the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it fall away. Just before dawn, Paul urged them to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, you've been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head. After he said this, he took some bread, gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there was 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach. When they decided to run the ship aground, if they could, cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders, and then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow struck first and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. Soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping, but the centurion, wanting to spare Paul's life and keep them from carrying out their plan, he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get on the planks and on the pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. Now that's pretty messed up wreck right there, isn't it? I mean, they've thrown anchors, they cut anchors loose, they're trying to be driven into a bay. And I don't know if you looked at, if you can Google map, not now while I'm speaking, but you can Google map Malta, Crete, and you can see, and Malta, and see that island. You know there's a place on Crete, Malta, called St. Paul's Bay. Interesting, huh? They named it after where they supposedly shipwrecked, as many ships had wrecked there before already, but they're even now trying to dive and find that ship, that certain ship that Paul was on, because they've named a bay where they thought it came in. It's really interesting. Google's amazing, isn't it? You just go anywhere in the world without ever leaving your chair, right? Just go fly up with it by satellite, right? But in this situation here, 14 nights later, they're being tossed about. They're losing all hope. But notice what he says here as we go down to they took soundings in the water. They're dropping ropes to find out how deep the water is, pull them back up and seeing that they're 120 feet, then 90 feet. Sailors have a way, now I don't think I could do this, but sailors have a way of hearing when they're not close to shore. It may be wavy and all, but it's not a sound. It's just wide open sound, if you will. As they got closer to the shore, how the waves would crash into the shore, they start hearing that. They may be a mile, 2 miles from it, but a good sailor can hear that. And they're scared to death because they're like, we hear land coming. We've got to do something. So what do? They drop 4 anchors down on the stern, trying to hold that ship down and keep it from going in, and prayed. They said they dropped anchors and started praying, God, keep us off of that land, or whatever God they prayed to. And said, keep us away from that land because we don't want to be dashed up against those rocks. You got to remember, hurricane force winds, these waves are probably, 10, 12 feet more higher? It only takes a 2-foot wave to make me sick, but the 10-foot, 12-foot waves pushing this boat around like a toy out on the sea, they are scared to death. They know what's coming up. But look what Paul says. In an attempt to escape, in verse 30, he said, in an attempt to escape the ship, the sailors, not the thieves and all, but the sailors took that little dinghy that they took in off of the back of the island of Clauda. They brought it on board. They were taking the dinghy, the little lifeboat. They were going to let themselves, they were acting like they were laying some more anchors out. They were fixing to escape. They're going to make a run for it and let them have the ship and just all die. You know, they were going to figure out a way to get away. But look what Paul says to the centurion Julius. Check this out. Paul said to the centurion in verse 31, he said, unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved. You see God's plan in this whole thing? It's all or none. You see that? It's all of them or none. And here's the plan of salvation. You hang on until we wreck, and then we swim to shore. That's God's plan for this whole thing. It's not 5 or 6 or 10 of them are going to escape in another boat for another way of salvation. You understand the picture of what's being drawn here? Even though this is a shipwreck, you can bring this to today, and you can tell other people, there's no other way, there's no other boat to get on, folks. This is the way you get to God. We're going to crash, we're going to swim to shore, and all lives will be saved, not a hair will be missed off of their head. But if any of them try to do anything else, because God's promise was what? All of them, Paul, all of them with you are going to be saved, but they need to follow exactly what you tell them to do. That's why it's so important for us when we are giving out the plan of salvation to people to not miss anything. Don't give them any kind of extras one way or this way or that way to get into it and say, oh, well, I can be saved then by just being a good person. Or I'm saved because I belong to a certain denomination of church. Really? But you never go. Really? And you're saved, right? Religion doesn't save us, does it, church? And interesting enough about salvation, it's either God's way or it's no way. That's the whole thing. People hate being told that they have no other choice but Jesus Christ. There is no other way. It's God's way or no way. Even to the point where Paul's looking at the centurion saying, Julius, look, man, if they leave, we could all die. Because God's plan is all of us are going to get saved if we follow the plan, if we follow what he's laid out. And so that's why he warns him in verse 31. He says, unless these men stay on the board, he's pointing at Julius saying, you can't be saved. We all got to follow this rule exactly. And so what Julius does in verse 32, the soldiers cut the ropes in the lifeboat and let it fall away. What a decision, right? Because you know in their mindset and their thinking, they're thinking in all humanistic terms, well, if not all of us, just some of us can get saved. And Paul's just preached to him the word of God that an angel appeared to him, told him all would make it if you just do what I say to do. And this is the way it's going to work. We're going to hit shore somewhere, and we're going to have to get on we're going to have to get on land. But the ship is going to be torn all to pieces. And there's some folks on it. It's interesting. The Bible puts that, Luke writes that in there. There's some folks on that ship can't swim. I'm thinking, why don't they have life vests, right? They can't swim. If that ship goes down, they're drowned. There's others that can, and that's why it says at the very end that the ship's captain said, all you that can swim, jump in and take off as soon as they wreck. Start swimming for the beach. The rest of you hang on because that ship is anchored. If you look at the front of it, I'm not sure which is the front. I think it's that side over there. If you look at the front of it, they've got anchors. That's what hit the sandbar. They're trying to go in straight into the sand. That's hit the sandbar. The waves are hitting the back of that ship, just tearing it all to pieces, ripping it to pieces when they hit the sandbar. And he said, if you can swim, jump without it. Jump off the front of that ship and head to the beach. If you can't swim, grab a piece of wood and float in, is basically what he's saying. Because there's a lot of wood on that ship, isn't it? It's coming all to pieces from the back toward the front. And we see what is happening here. And that's going to be the way they get to shore. But they got to do it exactly the way it is done in this way. So understanding that our salvation is lined up exactly the way God says it's lined up, not the way we would like it to be. Because if it's the way we would like to be, we would choose not to live holy. We'd choose to wait till the last minute. We'd choose to do, and it's just not going to work that way. Or we would choose that it's about being good. It's about being in the right church. It's about tithing. It's about all these kind of works. It's about taking of the sacraments like Lord's Supper, right? Baptism, getting wet in the water. That doesn't save you either, does it? It's important, but it's not salvation like Christ is to you. So Acts 4:12, if you went back to Acts 4:12, there's a verse in there that really sums up this whole thing of what's happening. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. Acts 4:12. Who's that name? Jesus, right? He is that name. He is the one that it's talking about. And when they cut this ship away, when they cut this boat away, I want you to notice something. The centurion, when Paul says, you won't be saved either, he's trusting what Paul's saying. All of a sudden, he's like, okay, Paul, you've been right all along. I'm going to cut this boat away. He didn't even have second thoughts about it, I'm sure. He's like, cut the dinghy loose. Let it go. We're all going to stay on this boat, and we're all going to live or we're all going to die, one or the other. That's what they basically said. No turning back at this point. There's a lot of fear in these guys. In verse 33, when it says Paul urged them to eat. Notice how Paul's taking over the cruise, right? I mean, everybody else is just out of there. It's just out. Matter of fact, when the verses say there that for those days and they saw no sun and no stars, that is a symbol of they're totally blind. They're totally blind. What is man without Jesus Christ? He's blind, isn't he? He doesn't have the light. He's walking in darkness. So as this ship is being pushed along and there's no sun, there's no stars, they got no way to guide that thing. They have no idea where they are. So what's going to happen when you're in complete darkness like that? Fear is going to rise up in your heart. I'm pretty sure that probably half of those passengers are paralyzed with fear and don't know what to do, can't do anything without somebody that has no fear standing up in front of them and saying, hey, it's going to be okay, giving them words of encouragement, right? My God said we're all going to make it. He said, but we need to eat. We haven't eaten for 14 days. We've been, I don't see how they ate then, but we haven't eaten for 14 days. Let's eat. And notice what Paul does. He takes the bread. Obviously, they had some food on board. He broke it. He gave thanks to his God right in front of all of them. Right in front of all. He didn't get off in the corner and say, thank you, Jesus, for that. No, right in front of all of them. He told them who his God was. He told them what this was all about. And then he served them bread. And they ate everything. They ate all they could. Which means they had a lot of bread on that boat. 276 people got full on that bread, on that meal. And he said, eat. And they all ate. He said, you're going to have to do this to survive. We're about to shipwreck, folks. We got to have some strength to swim to shore, that sort of thing. So they all trusted in what Paul was saying, and they all ate. Now, don't get this mixed up with he gave things like it's the Lord's Supper or anything, because these are unbelievers. He's not producing the Lord's Supper and having communion with them before they dive in. What he's doing is saying, just eat a meal, folks. Just eat the meal. But in the process of giving them that meal, he showed them his faith right in front of their eyes by blessing the meal and then handing it out to them. And so that way they could see that he is true to his God. He's faithful to his God by the way he did that. So their fear begins to subside just a tad bit, because suddenly they got a leader who has no fear of what's going on, because he knows in his mind and in his heart he's heading to Rome. He knows in his mind and in his heart none of these people are going to die if they just do exactly what I tell them to do and do it exactly the way they're supposed to do. And they will all be saved. Not a hair on their head will be hurt. And as I look at this whole thing, this whole shipwreck, being delivered from this shipwreck on the island of Malta, I can't help but look at how salvation works for all of us. It works for all of us the same way. That there's only one way to God through Jesus Christ. There's only one way, by confessing sin, by receiving him as our Savior, doing it exactly the way God says do it through the book of Romans, through all the Holy Bible, how he tells us to be saved and to get saved and to lead people into salvation. There's only one way. There's only one way to do it. And so therefore, it is going to be God's way or no way. And we see that here in this shipwreck. He said they saw the land. They were fearing. They started trusting. The ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow, the front hit first, right? And then later on, the back end just torn all to pieces in the surf. And they went through that, and they made it through because God said it would happen that way. Now, when you look at this, why in the world do we have trials? Why didn't God just run them on up into the bay and not hit anything and hit the shore and jump out on dry land? Why did God make it this difficult? That's always the question we have when we're going through tough times. Why, God, right? Well, I didn't think it's supposed to be like this. Why this trial? Why this going on in my life? Why is this all happening? Let me tell you something about trials. We need to understand something here. The trials are used by God to cause men to turn to God for salvation. He's going to use trials to turn men to God. He's going to use trials in us to prove that we really trust God. Because that's when you get tested, isn't it? That's when you're going to find out where your faith in God is. Trials make a believer stronger so he can stand against even tougher trials in the future and demonstrate the presence and power of God to a greater degree. How do people out there see God in us when they see us going through trials? Think about that. How many of you have ever had people come up to you and say, how can you be so calm during all this? How can you, what kind of hope do you have in you? Because you're not reacting to your family person's death or whatever the way that lost people do, that they have no hope. How is it that you can attend this funeral and you have a somewhat of a joy about you knowing that you're going to see that loved one again another day? How do you have that hope? They're watching you go through the trial, and the way you go through that trial presents what? God to them, doesn't it? Through the trial. If everything's a bed of roses and we have no troubles at all, then they're going to say, oh, yeah, you never tested. You don't have the life I have. That's why you believe in this God, because you're weak, right? No. We believe in him because we are strong through him. Amen? We believe in him because of that. We believe in him because we've understood and we've experienced the trials, and he's let us go through these kind of things that test our faith, make us stronger. And trust me, folks, everybody in this room, you're going to go through a trial. You maybe have one coming up. Amen? Just get ready for it. You may have one coming up. You may be involved in a shipwreck. It wasn't your fault, just like Paul here. It's coming up, and people are going to be watching. Amen? They're going to be watching and say, let me see how he goes through this. Let's see how she handles this. I want to see what happens here. Let me tell you something, folks. The world's watching us a lot closer than we realize. We may think they're blind to spiritual things, but they see us physically. They see us, and they see how we react to the physical thing and the spiritual thing. They're watching us like a book, aren't they? I mean, like a movie. They're watching us closely. So know that when you're out there and when everything's happening. But notice what God did. He overruled everything here. The plan of the prisoners, in the end here, they said they were going to kill the prisoners because they had a Roman law that if a prisoner escaped, the person watching that prisoner was supposed to die. That's why it was important when Jesus came up out of the grave that those soldiers that were supposed to be watching that tomb, they were all supposed to die. They didn't get their job done. They were supposed to die because they let him out of the tomb. But what did the Sanhedrin all say? We'll make a story. We'll cover for you. Don't worry about it. You're not going to die. We'll get with your boss and tell him. And they did. You just need to tell him that they came and stole his body. But anytime a Roman soldier failed at his job, especially at keeping prisoners at where they were supposed to be, they would die. When Paul and Silas are in the prison, what happens? The prison bars all fly open. The guy that was watching over the prison, what did he start to do? He started to fall on his own sword. Why? Because he knew the prisoners are escaping. I got to die anyway. I'm going to take myself out. I'm not going to die the Roman way. I'm going to do it myself. And Paul tells him, why? Whoa, 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 don't do it. We're all here. Not a single one of us have run out. Do not take your life. What happened to that guy? Paul, he healed up some of Paul's injuries and his wounds and took him home or did something, and the whole household got saved because that soldier didn't die but believed what was happening. And the soldier didn't die. So we see what's happening here. These soldiers are thinking, man, I'm going to kill these prisoners before I jump out the boat because I can't lose them or I die. And Julius, because he loved Paul, I think he's really loves Paul now, he stands up and said, no, Paul's a prisoner. I'd have to kill him too if we do that. And we're not slaughtering anybody. We're all jumping in. And we're going to go to shore with our prisoners. They may have been chained to them. I don't know. But they had to swim to shore in that way. But he stands up and he protects Paul's life because Paul is heading to Rome, and nothing's going to stop that because it's God's way of doing things. But God overrules the soldiers with the soldiers, interesting enough. Not with Paul, but with Julius, convincing them, you're not going to kill anybody. So God overruled that law. He overruled that mindset in those soldiers. And we see that he took care of that. But notice this, there's something to notice about this whole thing here that's pretty profound. God will always fulfill his promise and word no matter how much he has to overrule the plans and plots of men and the circumstances of nature and events. You realize that? God's will is going to get done no matter how chaotic it looks. He's going to overrule, isn't it? It's almost like Romans 8, right? Where he says, I'm going to turn that which was bad into good for you and, for those who love the Lord, right? And that's exactly what he's saying here. What's happening here is God's overruled the soldiers. He's overruled the Roman law. He's overruled the sailors trying to get in the boat. He's overruled so that everything will happen exactly the way he wants it because his will was everybody gets saved in that boat. Everybody lives through it. And in order for his will to get accomplished, he has to overrule some things. Can I tell you right now, God can overrule Washington, D.C.? Yeah, he sure does. And he sure can, and he sure will, in order to get his will done. He'll overrule any rule they try to do to throw God out. God is in. He's always been in. He's always going to be in. Amen? We think we've thrown him out of school. Guess what? Thousands of Christians go to public schools every day, so God is in. Amen? They haven't thrown him out of anything. They may be ignoring him. He's going to wake them up one day, but he's not been thrown out of anything. He's in the halls of Congress. He's in the halls of every church in this country. He's everywhere he wants to be. He's not excluded where men don't want him. Trust me, he's there. He's there. It's interestingly enough, evangelist I knew years ago used to go into the bars of New Orleans to witness. He was a brave joker, right? And people got saved in the bar, in the honky-tonk. Why? Because God is in there too. You can't keep him out, folks. You can't keep him out. And that's what he's saying here. God is in these places. God's will is going to be fulfilled. He's going to overrule the guy's plans and all these kind of things, any kind of law. He's going to overrule so that his will be done whether we like it or not, no matter what kind of circumstances. You know what that does to me? That doesn't offend me. What that does is give me hope that no matter what man tries to do, no matter what America tries to do, they can't outdo God. We serve an awesome God. Amen, church? We serve a God that bypasses all these little rules and regulations. He does what he wants to do because he is in charge, not America. He's in charge, and he will get it done exactly the way he wants to. So God did this exactly the way he promised he would, and everyone was saved through this. But notice this. In order for them to get saved, each one of them had to go through the frightening trial of being shipwrecked and scrambled ashore. Nobody got a free ride, did they? Nobody got a free ride. Everybody had to go through the baptism of the shipwreck, if you will, in order to get saved through it. And we're going to be on Malta. We're going to be on the island next week as we continue this study, and he's going to build a little fire and get bit by a snake, and some of them are going to start calling him God, Paul. But we see that they did all make it. Why? Because God said they would. And it wasn't bad luck. It wasn't just fate. It was God said it. That happened. It did it. There was a saying back in the 70s that said, God said it, I believe it, so that makes it true. Let me tell you something about that saying. God said it, so that makes it true whether you believe it or not. That's the truth of that saying. And God said it here. He made it happen, and that's the truth of what took place in this storm, in this whole thing. And he used a little man named Paul to bring all those people to a knowledge of who Jesus Christ is, who God was. He did it that way. I want to encourage you with one last verse here. 2 Timothy 4:18. 2 Timothy 4:18 says this, the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen. He'll safely guide us through anything that we have to face. So we fear nothing because God's hand's all over it. Amen, church? He's all over your life. He's all over my life. No matter what we go through, his hand is moving us through those things. And we are being witnesses, whether you like it or not. We're being witnesses for him during those trials. So continue standing strong. Continue to be strong in the Holy Spirit and in him. And let the world see him in you. Amen? Be that witness outside these walls. It's easy to come in here and be the witness and fellowship and love on each other, but out there, where the going gets tough, that's where God wants us to be. Out there, being a witness for him. Let me pray for you and let you guys go. Thank you for being here today.
All to Jesus I surrender. All to him I free.